Imagine a highly trained police officer walking into a life-or-death scenario. A high-stakes, chaotic environment where every fraction of a second counts.
Right, the ultimate pressure cooker.
Exactly. So what percentage of those officers do you think make a fatal lethal force decision error? Like 5%, 10%.
Most people would guess pretty low.
Yeah, but try over a quarter of them. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at an uncomfortable reality, why a uniform, a badge, or a 20-year resume might actually be masking a terrifying lack of real-world capability.
It's definitely a jarring concept to think about.
It really is. And our roadmap today is an April 2026 article from Valor Tech written by Herfel titled Overconfidence in Firearms Training, The Hidden Risk. The mission of this deep dive is to take you on a journey from common, unverified overconfidence to true, evidence-based tactical proficiency.
Which is a crucial journey for anyone in a high-stakes field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this, because taking a hard look at professionals whose literal jobs are life and death, and realizing that many might be operating on an illusion of competence, well, it's a lot to process.
It is a heavy realization, but an essential one to examine. To really anchor ourselves for this discussion, we have to establish a core reality right off the bat.
Which is?
That knowledge and skill are only valuable when they're understood and effectively applied under pressure. In tactical work, whether we're talking about law enforcement, military operations, or civilian self-defense, confidence is a prerequisite.
Because if you hesitate in those environments, you lose.
You lose. But the author makes a crucial distinction right away. Confidence without objective measurement is just theater.
Yes, theater.
Yeah. Anyone can put on the right tactical gear, use all the latest jargon, and, project absolute authority. But if that person hasn't been objectively measured in a realistic, high-pressure environment, that confidence is essentially a dangerous psychological mask.
Which brings us to the psychological trap that builds that mask in the first place. I mean, to understand how to achieve tactical proficiency, we first have to explore why experienced professionals stop evaluating themselves.
Right, the root of the problem.
Yeah, and the article points to the Dunning-Kruger Effect, but it strips away the popular internet definition. Usually you hear Dunning-Kruger and think it just means foolish people who think they're geniuses.
Right, that's the common misconception.
But the actual research by Kruger and Dunning points to a very specific failure of metacognition.
Yes, and understanding metacognition is the key here. Metacognition is essentially your brain's check engine light. It's the ability to step back and evaluate your own thought processes and your own performance.
That's self-awareness, basically.
Exactly. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when someone has limited ability in a highly specific domain. Let's say managing the complex recoil of a handgun while moving.
Okay, very specific skill.
Because they lack proficiency in that specific skill, they also lack the requisite knowledge to evaluate what good performance even looks like. The very knowledge required to realize they are performing poorly is the knowledge they are missing.
So the check engine light is broken because they don't even know what a functioning engine sounds like.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The numbers from the original study illustrate this perfectly, actually. They evaluated participants whose actual performance landed in the lowest quartile, around the 12th percentile.
Objectively terrible performance.
Right. But when you ask those same people to estimate their own ability, they confidently place themselves up near the 62nd percentile. They fully believe they were above average.
Which is why years of experience do not automatically grant immunity to skill decay. The author makes a really compelling argument that a person can spend 20 years reinforcing mediocre, unchallenged habits.
Just doing the wrong thing for 2 decades.
Exactly. If a professional just passes a basic minimum standard qualification once a year, they might look at their resume and boast about 20 years of experience. But what they actually possess is 2 decades of false feedback.
So credentials are just snapshots of a specific time, not permanent proof of current competence.
Precisely.
I have a hard time wrapping my head around how someone hides bad habits for 2 decades. Relying on an old tactical certificate seems like me relying on my high school calculus grade.
Right. They aren't exactly current.
Yeah, just because I passed a test at 18 doesn't mean anyone should trust me to design a bridge at 40. So what does this all mean for the instructor who relies solely on their resume?
What's fascinating here is the author argues that the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the novice. A beginner knows they are a beginner, They're cautious, they ask questions.
They double-check their work.
Exactly. The danger lies with the confident professional who stopped facing genuine evaluation years ago. You end up with instructors who cannot properly diagnose a subtle biomechanical error in a student's grip, yet they firmly believe they're imparting advanced tactical concepts.
So it isn't necessarily driven by arrogance.
No, it's a systemic failure of self-audit. They build a wall of certificates that generate social status, which makes everyone feel safe, while completely losing touch with their actual, measurable capabilities.
Well, if people can be delusional about their skills for 2 decades, the training environment itself has to be enabling it, right? If years of experience build a false sense of security, where is that false confidence being built?
That is the million-dollar question.
The article points directly at the massive disconnect between static range comfort and real-world pressure. I mean, a static shooting range is basically a sterile laboratory. It's clean, predictable, and the shooter is emotionally prepared.
Right. The consequences in that laboratory feel entirely theoretical. But the reality of operational performance is defined by extreme, sudden uncertainty.
It's just a totally different world.
It is. In a real encounter, time compresses. You are dealing with a flood of visual overload, auditory disruption, erratic movement, innocent bystanders, and highly ambiguous threat cues.
All while carrying the terrifying weight of legal consequences for every single round you fire.
Exactly. And low light, too.
It seems like we were talking about two completely different physical states. A lot of people compare this to practicing a speech alone in a quiet bedroom, whereas a real-world encounter is like delivering that same speech in a chaotic auditorium while people are throwing tomatoes at you.
That's a great analogy.
Could you explain just how drastically the human body changes when the tomatoes start flying?
The biological betrayal is profound, honestly. The article brings in a systematic review and meta-analysis from the journal Human Factors that tracks this exact mechanism.
What did they find?
They found that increased perceived pressure causes an average 14.8% decrease in marksmanship accuracy, and the biology behind that is fascinating.
Why does it drop so much?
Well, when your sympathetic nervous system detects a lethal threat, it dumps adrenaline. It instantly starts shunting blood away from your extremities and toward your major organs to prepare for survival.
Oh, because it thinks you're either going to have to run for your life or bleed out, so it pulls the resources to the core.
Exactly the evolutionary response. But the side effect of that blood shunting is a catastrophic loss of fine motor skills in your hands and fingers.
Which are the very tools you need to accurately operate a complex mechanical device like a firearm.
Precisely. Plus, your pupils dilate massively to let in more light, which physically destroys your ability to focus on anything up close, like the sights of a weapon. The body is prioritizing survival mechanisms over precision mechanics.
That makes total sense.
This is why the traditional training model of master the static range first and add stress later is fundamentally flawed. If you're building a motor program in a calm environment, you are building a skill that you physically cannot access when your body alters its state under threat.
Wait, if the biological response is that overwhelming, what about military veterans? We tend to view military operators as the ultimate stress-tested individuals.
They are, but it's specific.
Right. The article challenges the idea that military experience automatically translates to civilian or law enforcement contexts. Are they not immune to this?
They are absolutely subject to the same human biology. What they have is context-specific habituation. The mission drives the method.
Meaning what, exactly?
A military operator possesses incredible discipline, but their operational context is highly specific. They might be habituated to working within a cohesive team with heavy suppressive fire, distinct rules of engagement, and specific environmental backdrops.
So the backdrops and rules are totally different.
Right. If you drop that same veteran into a lone civilian self-defense scenario in a crowded parking lot or a solo police encounter, the legal constraints and threat profiles are entirely alien to their previous context.
So if they haven't stress-tested those specific new variables, their previous experience does not guarantee success. Okay, so the static range fails us because it ignores biology and context. Now that we know that, we need to look under the hood at why real-world pressure destroys those range-built skills. How exactly do stress and fatigue hijack the brain?
It's a massive cognitive disruption.
The article goes deeper into this, and it brings me back to that terrifying 27% statistic from the intro. Let's dig into that study. They took 122 active-duty police officers and put them through a highly realistic lethal force scenario.
It was an immersive simulation designed to trigger a genuine physiological threat response. The researchers tracked the officers' biometrics, and their heart rate spiked to 150 beats per minute.
Wow, 150.
Yeah, at that level of cardiovascular load, your body is screaming at you that you are in mortal danger. This triggered severe perceptual distortions, causing tunnel vision.
And their performance plummeted.
Under these conditions, the average performance rating of the officers was only 59%, and as you noted, 27% of them made lethal force errors.
That is wild. And the article points out that even elite personnel are vulnerable to this. There was another study focusing on elite Norwegian Special Forces operators.
Yes. The Norwegian study is a perfect example of biomechanical breakdown. The researchers introduced heavy, acute, exercise-induced stress before the shooting evolution.
And what happened?
As a result, the operators saw a significant increase in the vertical dispersion of their shot groups.
Aye.
Think about the mechanics of that. Vertical dispersion means their respiratory rate was so elevated from the exercise that they could no longer control the rhythmic rise and fall of their chest and shoulders.
Oh, wow. So just trying to breathe ruined their aim.
Right. The physical act of gasping for oxygen compromised the structural stability required for precision.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The physical fatigue isn't even the most surprising part to me. The article shifts to a live fire study involving trained infantry soldiers, focusing not on physical exhaustion, but prior mental fatigue.
Yes, mental exhaustion is a huge factor.
And they found that mental fatigue significantly increased marksmanship decision errors, even if shot accuracy itself wasn't significantly affected. Wait, so a shooter can perfectly hit the target over pressure, but make the completely wrong decision about whether they should shoot at all?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, withholding fire and processing information are just as much a part of performance as pulling the trigger. This connects directly to a psychological concept known as ego depletion.
How does that work?
Well, your brain's prefrontal cortex, which handles complex decision-making and impulse control, operates on a finite pool of cognitive resources. If an officer has spent hours in a hypervigilant state, scanning crowds and managing adrenaline, their prefrontal cortex is completely drained.
Like when you spend a 12-hour day dealing with complex problems at the office, and by the time you get home, you have no willpower left.
That is the exact mechanism. When a sudden, ambiguous threat presents itself, the brain is simply too tired to hit the brakes on a bad decision. An instructor who only measures holes in cardboard is entirely missing the cognitive side of the equation.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've diagnosed the disease unverified confidence destroyed by stress and mental fatigue. So what is the cure? How do we transition to evidence-based tactical proficiency?
The cure lies in objective stress testing. The article highlights a breakthrough piece of research by Nieuwenhuis and Udejans focusing on anxiety-based training.
Right. They studied officers training with colored soap cartridges shot by opponents.
Yes, to induce genuine anxiety, the opponents actively shot back. There was a highly tangible physical consequence to failure, and training with that anxiety stopped performance deterioration under pressure.
With positive effects lasting 4 months later, right?
Exactly. They effectively rewrote their baseline threat response.
I see. It's like a fire drill for your own life. You can't just read the fire exit signs. You have to practice when the alarms are blaring. So how can a learner incorporate this kind of stress testing into their routines?
This raises an important question regarding accountability. The primary tip is to expose learners to early, contextually relevant pressure. Training must include decision-making drills, low-light variables, and peer or video evaluation.
Because objective data replaces subjective feelings.
Right. Real competence requires scored, timed evidence, not just ego. Instructors must be performance diagnosticians, not motivational speakers with a gun. The standard is, can you perform, decide, teach, and prove it under pressure?
And deliberate practice requires pushing past comfort to target weaknesses. The safest professionals are the humble ones who actively invite correction and continuously test themselves against objective data.
Humility is the highest form of professionalism here.
Absolutely. So to briefly recap our journey today, we moved from the hidden risks of unverified confidence, explored the severe impact of mental fatigue and stress on the static range mindset, and landed on the absolute necessity of objective stress testing.
It's a critical shift in how we view training.
It really is. And I want to explicitly connect this back to you, the listener. Even if you aren't a firearms instructor or military operator, this deep dive proves that in any high-stakes field, from emergency medicine to corporate crisis management experience, without structured pressure testing, only produces familiarity, not true capability.
That applies universally, yeah.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about how confidence is often just a mask for a lack of true competence.
The illusion of competence.
Right. So what highly confident area of your own life has secretly avoided a real stress test for the past 5 years? If reality demanded objective proof of your skills today, what would the data actually say?